environmental policy. In fact, far from it. You have universities, research type folks, you have non-governmental organizations, you have the private sector. So this means that you have a lot of stakeholders who are inputting into political decisions that the government then creates, from which the government creates its policies. Within, talking more specifically about government, I think also, again, particularly from outside the U.S., you would tend to focus exclusively or primarily on the federal government, but it's important to remember that we have powerful and important state governments, many issues, environmental issues. Local governments are important actors. So you have this multiple layers. This is our federal system at work. You have multiple layers of government, and the interaction between those is, again, something that it takes a while for a new issue to be examined by that system, for the lines of authority to be decided upon, and then for policies to be developed at each level that link the different levels together. And I think a new thing that we're seeing in the U.S. that, particularly on climate change, that I'm not as aware of in other settings, and if there are other examples, I'd be happy to hear them, but starting to see regional, sort of intergovernmental groupings coming up on climate change. There's a group called RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. It's a collection of states in the northeast of the U.S. and working with some Canadian provinces. So there's real change going on in sort of the government and politics that is driven by the cross-border aspect of environment. Then looking at the federal government, I neglected to say, obviously there's, when you are talking about the federal government, there's also the global aspects of our work, our interactions with other countries through multilateral environmental agreements, etc. So many different layers of government involved here. And within the federal government, our famous division of power between the three branches, judicial, executive, and legislative. Congress is a critical element of this. Again, I think some people looking at the United States think of the executive as being kind of all-powerful, and that is certainly not the case. But I think overall the relationship between Congress and the executive is a positive one, in that there's a healthy discussion that goes on. It may take time to reach a consensus, but once that consensus is agreed, you really have a solid foundation on which to move towards implementation. There are a couple of principles through which we develop legislation and regulations in the U.S. I think these clearly apply in environmental context, but in other situations, other contexts as well. One of which is the need for a good scientific basis for objective data and clear science to drive or inform the policymakers. This is an interesting point, because I think policymakers and scientists are not known for their ability to communicate easily and clearly between those two communities. And some folks have, again, I've talked to student groups before where there's a sense that, well, you sort of have to be an environmental engineer or somebody who's a technical specialist to really kind of understand this, environmental issues, and to make a difference. And I don't think that's true at all. Based on our situation in the U.S., I think that somebody who cares about the environment is really the most powerful person around, and there's numerous examples of individuals who have gotten concerned over an issue, started a group, lobbied Congress, etc. And this ability to understand and communicate is a key part of this dialogue. So folks here, I gather that you tend more on the policy side of things, but if you have communication skills to be able to carry on a conversation with a scientist, to understand what the objective information can and cannot tell you, to be able to convert that into policy is a critical skill. And this is something that we as diplomats at least attempt to do, and that's to serve as the really the intermediaries, in our case, between two countries or two cultures, to explain our situation to other folks and to understand their situation, and in turn to reflect that back to our own country. So the communication of scientific data and turning that into policy that's practical is a great skill, and if any of you have that skill, you should consider yourselves lucky, and I hope you apply that to the very tough problems that come out of environmental politics, where you have a lot of scientific information that needs to be sort of converted and processed into a policy decision. Another principle of government that we apply routinely is public participation, and this I think also is strengthens the ultimate product of all these discussions. Part of that is you have situations like you can lobby through Congress, etc. You have public comments on draft laws, etc. And a related principle there is access to information. One of the, say, the guiding principles in the U.S. government is to publish information, to make that freely accessible to anybody who wants to look it up on the internet. And this, in turn, empowers a very large group of people who look at this information in the case of environment, scientific studies, or emissions data, this type of very practical information. And that is, by making that information available to anybody who's got a computer or a library, you empower a lot of folks to criticize, to suggest, and I think that goes towards building again, this sort of consensus, a shared view of what the best way forward is. And this is, it's not exactly a congenial process all the time. There's antagonism that's sort of built into that, but I think the end result of that vigorous discussion, as you might call it, is a very solid, solid base on which to build policy. This brings me to a discussion about two social groups that are scorned and looked down upon and almost not fit for mentioning in polite society, and those would be the media and lawyers. We like to pick on both of those groups, but they play such an important role, especially in the environment, but in many aspects of policy as well. The media, for its ability to reach out to a broad audience, to convey a message. I can guarantee, I've lived in places where they had neither a strong media nor a strong legal system, and I can assure you that you will gladly accept the negative aspects of those two groups in order to accrue the many benefits that they provide. To have the media searching out information, publicizing information, that brings the power of public opinion to bear on